This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. My fiancée jumped into the sea without hesitation to save another man. I used all my strength to pull her back, but she pushed my exhausted body back into the sea. Go save him. Later, she stood by my hospital bed and said, "Aren't you good at swimming?" I turned my head and replied, "Leave. I don't love you anymore." Today, my fiancée and I were taking wedding photos by the sea, with our wedding date set for the end of the year. As the photographer kept clicking the shutter, our happiness was being captured and preserved. Serena. Suddenly, someone called out my fiancée's name. She didn't turn her head, keeping her pose, but her body stiffened. I recognized that man. It was her childhood friend, Tony. For the past 6 years, he had constantly intruded into our lives. Because of him, Serena and I had countless arguments. Serena always said, "If something had happened between us, would you even have a chance?" In the end, I gave in, because I loved her. "Do you want to pause?" I asked Serena. She shook her head firmly. "Let's finish the photo shoot first." The photographer instructed us to change our pose. "Bride, get closer to the groom, tilt your head up a bit to kiss him, and smile bigger." Serena tried to smile, but it was stiff and unnatural. Suddenly, there was a splash. Someone jumped into the sea. "Someone's in the water." People on the beach started screaming and shouting. Before I could react, Serena tore off her veil and jumped into the sea, swimming toward the struggling person. But the wedding dress, soaked in water, became too heavy, and she was almost swallowed by the sea. I immediately jumped in after her, using all my strength to pull her out. By the time I dragged her to shore, I was completely exhausted. "Rocky, go save Tony." Before I could speak, Serena pushed me back into the sea. Waves crashed over me one after another, and I felt myself being dragged deeper into the ocean. I struggled to swim, but my body kept sinking. The only person I could call for help was Serena. Cough, cough. Not far away, Tony had already been rescued by someone else, coughing as he held his chest. The waves surged again, and I held my breath, diving underwater until the waves receded. I struggled to the surface, just in time to see Serena running toward Tony. Her figure grew smaller, almost as if she had abandoned me without hesitation. The last thing I saw was Serena embracing Tony, patting his back. The two were nestled close, and her white wedding dress looked so pure and beautiful. In hindsight, all the signs were there. Serena always said she didn't love Tony, but when it came to choosing between him and me, she didn't hesitate to choose him. I couldn't pretend not to see anymore. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. My mother sat by my bed, her eyes red from crying. "Rocky, you're finally awake. Are you hungry or thirsty? Do you feel any discomfort?" Dazed, I shook my head. Just as I was about to speak, my lungs felt like they were about to burst, and I couldn't stop coughing. "Don't talk yet. The doctor said you inhaled too much water." My mother quickly stood up, gently patting my back, full of worry. "Don't ever go to the beach for wedding photos again. It's too dangerous. Thank goodness you were saved, otherwise I'd sue the company into bankruptcy." It turns out the staff from the photo studio had saved me. I remained silent. All I could think about was the terror of being swallowed by the sea. "At least you and Serena are okay. How would us old folks live if something had happened to you both?" I looked down at my hospital gown. "Are you worried about Serena? She's fine. She came by while you were still unconscious. Right now, she's visiting a friend. I heard her friend also fell into the sea. That place is truly cursed. What's the point of it being beautiful if it's so dangerous? You guys should never go there again." "We won't. There won't be a next time." I closed my eyes, feeling exhausted. My mother told me to rest and went out to buy some necessities. I don't know how much time passed before the door opened again. I turned my head, ready to call my mother, but I saw Serena standing in the doorway with red eyes. I didn't care to look at her expression, so I averted my gaze and ignored her. She walked over in heels, standing by my bed, looking down at me. "Don't you work out every day? How are you this week?" Her first words were to blame me. My chest ached for a moment, but the pain quickly faded. I croaked, "Serena, is your childhood friend more important than your fiancé? Important enough that you watched me drown without turning back?" "I'm sorry." Her voice carried a hint of grievance. "I thought you could swim back." Tony wasn't in good condition, so I instinctively went to check on him. I nodded. "So, you love him, don't you?" Everything made sense now. No one could replace the bond between childhood friends. In that moment, all my emotions and resentment seemed to be washed away by the sea. Serena denied it. I love you. I just see him as a brother. To hell with your brother. I couldn't help but cough twice, and she bent down to pour me a glass of water. After catching my breath, I said, Serena, it's over. I don't love you anymore. She slammed the cup on the table. Are you really going to end our 6-year relationship over this one small thing? I looked into her angry eyes, which held emotions I couldn't understand. I spoke slowly. I saved you, yet you pushed me into the sea to save a stranger. I had no strength left, but you walked away without looking back. I almost died in the ocean, and you call this a small thing? Her emotions crumbled as she collapsed on top of me, sobbing, Honey, I was wrong. It was the first time she had apologized, and the first time she called me honey. I really thought you could swim back. Honey, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I pushed her away. It's your fault, but I won't forgive you. Serena, we're done. You can leave now. She looked up, shocked. Her voice raised, Rocky, I've already apologized and promised it won't happen again. Why are you being so unforgiving? I was done. Don't you understand? I said, we're done. Please leave. At that moment, the door was suddenly thrown open. Are you serious right now? Tony stormed in, looking down at me arrogantly. Serena already said she didn't mean it, and she's crying, apologizing to you. What more do you want? I looked up at him and couldn't help but laugh coldly. Maybe my usual silence made him think I was weak? And who the hell are you to come here and criticize me? Tony glared at me, his disdain clear. I grew up with Serena. She's like a sister to me, and I won't stand by and watch you bully her. I picked up the spilled cup and took a sip of water, then smirked. If you're so protective of Serena, why don't you marry her yourself? If he really wanted to marry her, he would have done it long ago instead of stringing her along for years. Tony responded righteously, I see Serena as a sister. She loves you. I wasn't sure if it was my words or Tony's, but Serena's face turned pale, devoid of any color. I laughed out loud. You two are such loving siblings. All it took was a couple of coughs, and she left her fiancé for you without a second thought. Tony clenched his fists. You didn't die, so stop being sarcastic towards Serena. I threw the cup down. Get your filthy selves out of here, or I'll make you regret it. Serena stared at me in disbelief. Do you really have to be so unreasonable? Unreasonable? I could still vividly remember the helplessness of sinking into the sea, wave after wave burying me. The suffocating pain as seawater filled my lungs and nostrils. That silent, hopeless feeling would stay with me forever. I'm going to rest now. Please leave. Fine, you're kicking me out. Don't regret this. Serena stormed out, dragging Tony behind her. An hour later, my mom rushed back into the hospital room, and the first thing she did was check my forehead. I frowned. Mom, what are you doing? She touched my head, then hers, muttering to herself, the temperature's normal. Son, you didn't get a fever, right? You want to break up with Serena? Yes. You're supposed to get married by the end of the year. I don't love her anymore. My mom lost her composure. Don't love her? Yesterday you were all smiles taking wedding photos, and today you don't love her? Did you drink too much seawater and go crazy? Serena and I met in our first year of college, and it was love at first sight. We spent our college years happily together. After graduation, we met each other's parents, and 2 years later, our wedding was set for the end of the year. I thought I could be happy with Serena forever, until her childhood friend returned from abroad. At first, Serena described Tony as a playboy, a total womanizer. She even passionately recounted how they dated once, but broke up because Tony cheated on her, and she hated him. She said if it wasn't because they grew up together, she would have blocked him a long time ago. She promised not to contact him, but they started going to karaoke together, traveling together, playing games together. She said she didn't like playing support roles because they didn't stand out, and she wanted to play the marksman while I tanked in front of her to take the damage. But once Tony came back, I was no longer her first choice for duo queue. She started playing the support character who clung to Tony all the time. Her instinct stopped being me. When I was exhausted, she pushed me into the sea. When I was calling for help, she turned her back and walked away. After hearing all this, my mom's face turned pale with anger. She called my dad right then and told him to arrange for the engagement to be canceled. We really misjudged her. My son's fiancée can't even compare to a random passerby who almost got him killed. After hanging up, I asked, confused, wasn't it the wedding studio staff who saved me? My information's not clear either. I only know you were swept quite far away, and it was a young girl who spotted you. She worked hard to carry you back to shore and performed CPR to revive you. Things were too chaotic then to get her contact details. I've already sent people to look for her. We must properly thank our savior." I nodded in full agreement. The next morning, Serena's parents personally came to the hospital. Before coming, they had already gone to apologize to my parents. They were furious, especially Serena's father, who I heard almost hit Serena. Serena's mother, full of anger, said, "Rocky, I've scolded Serena harshly. She and Tony grew up together. They're just like siblings. She wasn't thinking when she made that mistake. She's always loved you." Serena's father gritted his teeth, slapping his thigh. "That punk Tony, what was he doing tagging along when you were taking wedding photos? I hit him on your behalf yesterday. There won't be a next time." They then unleashed a flurry of curses at Tony. Then, right in front of me, they called Serena. "Where are you? Get to the hospital right now." On the other end, the wind was so loud it almost drowned out Serena's voice. "Rocky wants to break up with me. What's the point of going to the hospital? I'm not going." Her father, face flushed with anger, yelled into the phone, "Rocky is just furious. Get over here and apologize right away." From the background, I heard Tony's voice. "We're about to take a sharp turn. Hold on tight to me." Then Serena's voice followed. "Dad, I'm busy right now. I'll hang up." "You brat." Serena's father, furious, almost threw his phone but stopped when he remembered I was present. He took a few deep breaths to compose himself. When he turned back to me, his face was calm again. "Serena's busy with work outside, but she'll come apologize in person later." My mom stood up immediately. "Serena's with that guy, right? He even told her to hold on tight. If they're so close, then don't come messing with my son. My son isn't taking every offer that comes his way." Serena's father was visibly embarrassed, glaring at her mother. "Look at how well you've raised our daughter." Serena's mother, equally upset, tried to console me. "Rocky, you focus on recovering. Your uncle and I will go drag Serena back right now to beg for your forgiveness." Hearing Serena's name made me lose my appetite. I tossed the apple one was holding straight into the trash. "She doesn't need to come. We've already broken up." Serena's parents stormed out, vowing to get justice for me. After a few more days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and finally able to move freely again. During this time, Serena's parents didn't come back, likely because Serena refused to relent and they couldn't face me. That was fine by me. Since I decided to break up with Serena, it was best to make a clean cut. I drove to the new house. This place had once carried all my hopes for the future. Every brick and tile in this villa was handpicked by me, from countless trips to the market, all according to Serena's preferences. The interior design was her beloved British style. She once said she wanted to give me 2 children and had prepared the nursery and nanny's room on the first floor so the kids could play outside easily. To the right of the entrance was the garden, and to the left, the vegetable beds. She had bought many seeds, wanting to practice gardening so our kids could eat vegetables she grew herself. Now, the soil in the vegetable beds was so dry it had cracked, no longer suitable for planting anything. Just like my relationship with Serena, there was no chance of it blossoming anymore. As I packed my things, I looked at everything so familiar, and memories of Serena and I flooded my mind. But all of it needed to be decisively left behind. Just as I was about to leave, the door opened from the outside. Serena, upon seeing me, looked surprised at first, then a trace of panic flashed across her face. Behind her stood Tony. Tony was dressed in all-black streetwear, sporting a pair of black Martin boots. His gray hair and sparkling ear studs made him look like a trendy model. Serena looked a little stunned. "Rocky, why are you here?" But then she smiled knowingly, as if convinced I was here to ask for forgiveness, just acting out of jealousy. "Don't get the wrong idea, okay? My car is in for maintenance, so Tony gave me a lift home." I looked past Serena and locked eyes with Tony. Indeed, he was a real heartthrob. No wonder Serena couldn't let him go, always entangled with him. "We meet again," I said with a smile. Tony looked surprised, watching me with an odd expression. Then, I raised my arm to block the two of them and said flatly, "Miss Serena, this is the house I prepared for our wedding. Now that we're over, please don't step foot in here again. Move all your things out by the end of today." In the 6 years we'd been together, I had never spoken to her like this, and I had never called her Miss Serena before. Serena was furious. "Rocky, what are you doing?" I already explained. It was just a ride. Do you have to act so passive-aggressive in front of Tony? He was just being kind and giving me a lift. Does being with you mean I can't have any male friends? You're really ending our relationship over such a small matter? I must have misjudged you. The more she spoke, the angrier she got. She even came at me, hammering on my chest. I grabbed her wrist. "Serena, we're already broken up. You must move out of my house with your friend." And one more thing, I don't like you anymore, so stop overthinking it. Thank you. Serena's eyes widened as she stared at me, but there was no longer a trace of love for her in my gaze. She was livid. Fine, I don't like you anymore either. She then turned and stood on tiptoe to kiss Tony. Tony, ever so obliging, wrapped his arms around her, and the two started making out passionately. Were they trying to put on a show for me? Sorry, I wasn't interested. Have you kissed enough yet? Do I need to call the police and report you for illegal trespassing? I really dialed 911. Serena could act out all she wanted, but she was still her family's darling daughter. She had to think about her parents' reputation. She gritted her teeth in anger. Rocky, you're ruthless. Who cares about your lousy house anyway? Unable to save face, Serena called a moving company on the spot to pack up her belongings. As she left, she spat out one last threat: don't ever come begging to me. Right in front of her, I made a phone call. I need the bed and sofa removed and the whole place disinfected. Her face turned red and pale alternately. After collecting myself, I returned to work. The first thing I did was have my assistant list my house for sale through an agency. I hadn't been to the office in a while, and work had piled up. By the time I finished, it was already 2 p.m. I went downstairs for a meal, but was told that my favorite tomato beef stew was sold out. I sighed. Suddenly, a fragrant plate of beef stew was placed in front of me. I looked up to see a girl smiling at me, showing off her little tiger teeth. Looks like you're all better, out here enjoying good food again. I raised an eyebrow. She winked playfully. Next time I save someone, I'll make sure to pick one who's awake, so at least they'd recognize their savior. I immediately realized it was her. You're the one who saved me. Thank you so much. Order whatever you want. It's on me. How about a feast with rare delicacies like wild mountain mushrooms and cloud geese? I responded sincerely, of course, but we'd need to change venues for that. Sounds good, but I can't today. I'll be late for work. She casually took out her phone. Let's exchange Facebooks. Set another time for a proper meal. Dragging you ashore really drained me. I was in the hospital for 3 days. I deserve a good meal. I agreed. Sure. We added each other on Facebook. Savior, what's your name? Haley. I added her name to my contact list. I'm Rocky. Haley beat me to it, showing me her phone where she had already saved my contact. She laughed. Senior, you're kind of a big deal at South China. So that's how she knew me. I smiled back. Turns out you're my junior. Haley had probably heard about me and Serena, whose relationship was once the envy of the entire school. Even now, our story still lingered on campus, so it was no surprise that Haley, 3 years my junior, knew of me. When I asked about the day I almost drowned, she explained she had been alone at the beach, reflecting, when she spotted me struggling in the water. At just 6 meters tall, she used every ounce of strength to drag me ashore, collapsing in the hospital for 3 days afterward. I felt guilty and wanted to compensate her, but she refused and only agreed to let me treat her to a meal. As work beckoned, we parted ways and returned to our respective companies. Back in my office, I found Serena already sitting inside. Where have you been? I thought to myself, what business is that of yours? From the moment we decided to break up, I let her go completely, blocking her on every platform, cutting off all contact. It might take some time to get used to, but compared to nearly losing my life, that discomfort was barely a scratch. As for her, without my 6 years of care, what could she do besides cling to Tony? But Tony was a player, not someone who'd give her promises and a future like I did. Serena stepped closer, reaching for my hand before pulling back. She looked at me with a touch of sadness. These past few days, I've been going to that hot pot place on East Street, eating the spicy broth alone. I nodded nonchalantly and walked past her to my desk. Just seeing her made me agitated. Her eyes grew red. Every time, the spice was unbearable. You like spicy food, but you always had bland Cantonese dishes with me. When the heat overwhelmed me, I wondered, did you feel like the food was tasteless and unhappy too? In our relationship, you always compromised for me. I got so used to it that I thought you'd forgive me no matter what I did. She looked remorseful, yet also seemed to expect me to comfort her. Rocky, I know I was wrong now. I grew impatient. We've already broken up. What's the point in talking about this? Tears welled up in her eyes. I was seriously fed up. I have work to do. If there's nothing else, please leave. Rocky, she looked at me with sorrow, finally bursting into tears. I don't love Tony. I love you. I admit I acted recklessly because I thought you loved me so much that you would never leave me. So you figured after I narrowly escaped death, I'd still unconditionally put up with you? I interrupted her. She bit her lip and cried harder. I completely lost my patience. Serena, stop dwelling on the past. It's over, but I still love you. What do I have to do to make you forgive me? She asked in despair. I slid my chair back. Just don't show up in front of me again. She rushed over, grabbing my hand. Rocky, don't say hurtful things just to push me away. That will only drive us further apart. Is this woman out of her mind? I couldn't deal with this anymore. I bolted from the office, telling security not to let Serena back in. When I got home, Haley had messaged me on Facebook. Senior, I'm free on Saturday. I replied immediately, great, let's meet Saturday. On Saturday morning, I arrived to pick Haley up. Dressed in casual clothes, she ran over to me, her forehead slightly sweaty. Senior, let's go. She beamed, showing off those little tiger teeth. Don't run. What's the rush? I grabbed a bottle of water from the trunk and handed it to her. Girls prefer milk tea, Senior. I detected a hint of playfulness in her voice. All right, I smiled. Let's go get some milk tea. Thanks, Senior. Haley grinned, and suddenly the day seemed brighter. We headed to the milk tea shop. Before I could even ask what she wanted, she had already ordered hers and turned to me. Senior, what would you like? Serena had always controlled her weight and never drank milk tea, nor let me have any either. Now that we were here, I actually wanted to try some, but I wasn't sure what to order in case it didn't taste good. Anything's fine. Then you'll have the same as me. With 2 identical cups of milk tea in hand, I turned to look at Haley, and for some reason, I felt at ease. Sipping on the tea, I asked her where she wanted to go for lunch. Haley suggested that I accompany her to the mall, and I agreed. Since she didn't accept any gifts from me, this was a way for me to show my appreciation. I walked with Haley from the 1st to the 5th floor. She bought 4 inexpensive items, but she never gave me the chance to pay. She said, "Thanks for accompanying me. It's been hard to find someone to shop with since I had a fallout with my best friend. I'm happy to help." After shopping, Haley suggested hot pot for dinner. I looked at her and asked, "Just hot pot?" She replied casually, "Hot pot is my version of a gourmet feast." Fair enough. But what surprised me was that she chose the hot pot restaurant I loved most, the one on East Street. "How well do you handle spicy food?" she asked. I used to love spicy food, but I haven't had any for a while. "Not sure how I'll handle it now," I admitted. Like a little sparrow, she chattered away while planning today's meal. "Let's get the mild spicy option. We shouldn't order the super spicy beef. It'll make the broth too hot." Mild spicy should have been fine, but after so long without it, I was sweating from the heat. Haley quickly handed me a tissue. "How about switching to a half and half pot?" "No need. Let's stick with the spicy pot." Even though it was hot, it felt amazing. You've got some tissue stuck on your face," Haley pointed out. I reached up but couldn't find it. "Where?" She leaned closer to pluck it off for me. "Here." I instinctively straightened up. "Hey, thanks." "No problem." Just as Haley returned to her seat, a sudden gust of wind blew past, lifting her hair slightly. And then, someone rushed toward us, slapping Haley hard across the face. It was Serena. "You slut. How dare you seduce my fiancée?" She spat furiously. I frowned, stepping in front of Haley. "Serena, are you crazy?" She acted like she didn't hear me and tried to push me aside. When she couldn't, she glared at me, not answering my calls or messages. "Now I know why. You've got a new lover." Rage surged through me. This woman was truly unhinged. "Have you had enough of this?" I demanded. "Enough?" She shrieked like I had hit a nerve. Pointing at me, she screamed, "You're the one caught cheating in broad daylight." Her tantrum was causing quite a scene. The other diners were watching, some even pulling out their phones. I didn't care about that, but I couldn't let Haley take the blame. In a low voice, I said, "Serena, let me make it clear. We're over." Smack. Haley was suddenly beside me, delivering a slap to Serena's face. "That's for hitting me." Serena lost it, swinging a punch toward Haley. I quickly blocked her, shielding Haley behind me. Still angry, Haley shouted from behind me, "You have no right to blame Rocky. You were already fooling around with your side guy while you were with him. You pushed him into the sea, almost drowning him. What right do you have to be here?" She continued, "Yes, I like Rocky. So what? You canceled the wedding and officially broke up. A great man like him is back on the market. Why shouldn't I like him?" "Serena, people can't be greedy, eating from one bowl while eyeing another. You really think you deserve him?" I had no idea Haley was this sharp-tongued. Serena's tears started flowing. She looked at me pitifully, silently pleading for me to intervene. Without hesitation, I took Haley's hand and walked out. "Haley, let's go get you checked at the hospital." "Rocky, you." As I passed Serena, I saw her stunned expression, the pain in her eyes finally surfacing. Maybe now she realized she had lost me for good. At the hospital, the doctor said Haley was fine, no need for any medication. In the car, I apologized, feeling deeply guilty. Haley shouldn't have had to endure any of this. She laughed brightly. "I already slapped her back, didn't I? No harm done. Besides, she hit me, not you." Her words lightened the mood, but what she said at the hot pot place still lingered in my mind. I hesitated to bring it up, but then she suddenly changed the subject. "Do you remember that burger stand by Southgate?" she asked. "Wait, what? That was so random." Of course I remember. I didn't eat much at dinner. Suddenly, I'm craving one of those burgers. Out of guilt, I agreed without hesitation. "Let's go get some now." "Great," she beamed. I couldn't believe she was still so cheerful after being slapped. We went to the burger stand by Southgate. Without discussing it, we both ordered the same thing: burgers with potato strips and egg. As steam rose from the freshly made burgers, Haley's voice cut through the mist. "Do you know when I first started liking potato strip burgers?" I shook my head. It was during New Year's one year. My grandma was critically ill, and my phone and wallet were stolen. I had no way to get a cab or even buy food. When I asked fellow students for help, they all thought I was a scammer. At my lowest moment, I saw a couple arguing. The girl said she couldn't eat carbs at night because it would make her gain weight, then stormed off. The guy hesitated but didn't chase after her. Instead, he noticed me crying. He asked if I wanted a potato strip burger. I was so hungry that I immediately agreed. I thought he'd just give me the one his girlfriend didn't want, but he bought me a fresh one. And when he learned I didn't have a phone, he called a cab for me. Haley's eyes sparkled as she looked at me. "That guy was you." I felt a jolt of recognition. I vaguely remembered one time Serena had thrown a tantrum over a burger, and in my frustration, I had helped a crying girl. "I only bought you a new one because I felt awkward. Pride got the better of me," I confessed. She smiled sweetly. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you helped me, and from that day on, you became my hero." I was speechless. "Rocky," she said, her eyes shining, "since we've run into each other again, and you're single now, how about letting me chase you?" I almost choked on my burger. Do girls really ask so directly nowadays? My ears warmed up as I tried to stay composed. "You saw how messy my last relationship was. I'm not in a place to give you an answer right now." She winked playfully. "That's fine. I'll just get in line. That way, I'll have priority when the time comes." "Wait, is that even allowed?" That day, Serena was furious. It's said that as soon as she got home, she started a huge fight, demanding her father immediately terminate the cooperation with my family. Business isn't a joke. Once an investment is withdrawn halfway through a project, both parties suffer significant losses. Our parents saw that the situation between us was escalating, so they arranged another meeting to clear things up. I wasn't keen on going. If she wanted to make a fuss, I would just ignore her. But my parents were worried about the company, so they dragged me to Serena's house. When Serena's father and mother saw me at their door, they were thrilled, offering me coffee right away. "Rocky, don't take Serena's behavior too seriously. She's immature, and we don't expect her to grow up anytime soon. We just hope you two can end things peacefully without affecting the business. Shake hands and make up, and we'll move past this, continuing as business partners." I made my position clear. "Uncle, Aunt, my breakup with her has nothing to do with business. If the project is right, I'm willing to continue working together." Our parents then looked over at Serena, who remained silent, staring at me. I ignored her. Suddenly, she let out a cold laugh. "Rocky, you let your new flame hit me, took her to the hospital, and left me behind. Did that make you happy?" Everyone was stunned. Serena's father scolded her. "What new flame? What are you talking about? Rocky's been cheating on me for a long time." He stood by and watched his new flame hit me, then left me to take her to the hospital. Her words were full of sarcasm. "He cheated first, but wants to blame everything on me." "Rocky, you're not even a real man." I retorted. "We've already broken up, so it's okay for you to cuddle with other men, but I'm not allowed to move on?" Serena, humiliated and enraged, slammed her hand on the table, eyes red. "Still lying, aren't you?" Her aggressive attitude reminded me of how unreasonable she had always been when we were together. She always believed only what she wanted to believe, never considering anyone else's perspective. I was immensely relieved I had chosen to leave, or I would still be trapped in her torment for the rest of my life. I smiled. "That day, you pushed me into the sea and left me to fend for myself while you went to take care of Tony. It was Haley who saved me from death. Now I'm planning to pursue her. Is there a problem with that?" Serena's parents were dumbfounded. So were my parents, probably not expecting me to have a new love interest so soon. Serena, furious, laughed bitterly and pointed at me, her voice filled with hatred. "So, you finally admit it. Fine, very well. You're right, I love Tony, and you were just a stand-in. I'm marrying him soon, and from now on, we're strangers." tears. She wiped her reddened eyes and turned to leave, but her steps were slow, as if waiting for me to stop her. So, I called out, "Wait." Serena instantly froze, raising her chin coldly. "What?" I spoke calmly. "After our families finish the current projects, we won't cooperate anymore. Don't invite me to your wedding, and don't come to mine." She stiffened, clenched her fists tightly, and glared at me with venom. "Fine, remember what you said." Serena stormed off, leaving our bewildered parents behind. I scratched my nose and excused myself as well. Without further explanation, I went to the supermarket, bought a bunch of snacks and food, and headed to Haley's place. When she saw me, she was surprised. "Rocky, what brings you here?" "Just came to check on you." She immediately made room, smiling widely. "Come in quickly, it's cold outside." I bought a bunch of groceries on the way. "I'll take them to the kitchen." She followed me in. "You bought groceries too? Perfect. I didn't have breakfast yet. What are we having?" "Yesterday's hot pot wasn't satisfying. Today, let's have a proper meal." Haley smiled warmly. "Sounds good." She rolled up her sleeves to prep the vegetables while I handled the chopping. We worked seamlessly together. As she busily moved around, I snapped a picture of her profile as she worked on the food. Then, I posted it on my social media with the caption, "My girl." Hearing the sound of the camera, she turned around. "Were you taking a picture?" "Just of the food," posting it on my feed. She quickly wiped her hands. "I want to be the first to like it." Haley saw the post and was stunned, unable to believe her eyes. "Rocky, did you agree?" she asked, full of hope. I nodded. "Girlfriend, stop calling me Rocky now." "Rocky." She threw herself into my arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I love you." Whoa, already confessing her love. I hugged her tightly, my ears turning red. "Keep it low-key." "How should I keep it low-key?" she asked playfully, before suddenly standing on her tiptoes and planting a kiss on the corner of my lips. "Is this low-key enough?" Whoa, how could I let her take the initiative like that? I picked her up, wrapping her around my waist, and deepened the kiss. After eating our fill at Haley's place, I went home. To my surprise, Serena was standing at my doorstep, looking like a scorned woman. She glared at me, fists clenched, body trembling with anger. "You're with Haley now? You even kissed her?" I raised an eyebrow. "Does that have anything to do with you?" "Rocky, do you really not love me anymore? Do you really hate me that much, using another woman to hurt me?" I was beyond frustrated. "Serena, stop acting like a peacock showing off its feathers. Not loving you doesn't mean I hate you. Just stop bothering me, okay?" Serena closed her eyes in despair, tears streaming down her face. "Fine. Remember the despair you gave me. Don't regret it later." She ripped off the necklace I had given her when we got engaged, threw it to the ground, and stormed off. She was completely done. That afternoon, I saw Serena's post on social media showing her marriage certificate. Her caption read, "My man, childish." Did she think I would care or get upset seeing that? Without love, she had no power to act recklessly anymore. Even if she got married 10 times, I wouldn't bat an eye. I casually blocked her. The next day, my parents mentioned that Serena's family was in chaos. Apparently, right after Serena and Tony got their marriage certificate, Tony went off to a hotel with another woman. Serena's mother was so furious she ended up in the hospital, while her father was threatening to disown her. My mom asked if I wanted to check on Serena's parents, but I refused. Not only would I not visit, but I planned to stay far away. That same day, I moved in with Haley. We went to work together every day, bought groceries, and cooked dinner together after work, and traveled on holidays. Life was simple but peaceful. The next news I heard about Serena came 3 months later. She had divorced Tony. One night, she called me crying. "Rocky, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I shouldn't have impulsively married him. Please come back. Don't abandon me." I cut her off. "Who are you? Do I know you?" Then, I hung up and blocked her again. A soft hand wrapped around my neck, her voice playful. "Who was that?" "Just an ad." My lips were quickly sealed with a kiss. "Shall we continue?" "Of course." The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.